Hello, this is Practical Solid. My name is Angelo Feltens, and today I'm going to show you how you can run your own Solid server on your local machine. And yes, it's really only one Docker command. Follow me to see how easy it is done. Until today, we were using a hosted Solid pod at solidcommunity.net. Today I'm going to show you how you can run your own Solid server on a machine you own, like on a VPS or your local machine or on a Raspberry Pi or anything like that. We can just use docker run to start a new container, and we will map port 3000 to a local port 3000 here, because 3000 is the default port that Community Solid Server is using. So we will map the port or the default port of Community Solid Server to our local host port 3000 here. And that should be enough for now. Let's just start it and see what happens. So there is some logging involved here. Now we can switch to our browser and see that already a instance of Solid Community Server is running on localhost port 3000. And we could now sign up for a new account on our server. But I won't do this right now because the way we started it has some flaw if you want to use the server to really store some data, because in the default setting, the server will store all the data only in memory. To be able to run a server that can store data permanently, we will need to pass a config file to the startup command. So we'll do this again with docker run, but this time we will pass a custom config, which is at css config file JSON, which is a config file that comes delivered with the Community Solid Server pod. So we don't need to write it ourselves, we can just refer to it. This config will make the Solid server to use a file system-based storage. So for that to work, we also need to pass in a path to the file system we are going to use, or the directory we are going to use. And we'll just use the data directory. But of course, this will be inside the Docker container, so we will need a mount to actually see it on our file system. So let's add a volume from the local data directory to the pod, and say this the data on the pod. And let's try this and start the server. Takes only a few seconds to load. Also loaded the configs, listening to port 3000. Now before we switch back to the browser, let's take a look at the directory. So we have a data directory here now, and there's nothing in there yet. Okay, let's go to the browser again and see our new pod or our new Solid server. We still have to create an account in a pod. Okay, Practical Solid. Generate a password. And then we create a pod. In Community Solid Server, the accounts and the pods are separated, so you can create multiple pods per account, which is quite nice. So let's create our first pod. Just name it local pod for now, because we are running a server on localhost here, which we are not going to expose anywhere. We could also refer to our external web ID, like an existing web ID we already own, like the one we have on solidcommunity.net. But for now, I will just stick with the default setting, which is to create a new web ID for this pod. Create pod, and here we are. We now have our pod at localhost port 3000/local pod. Navigate to it and see the files that are in here. We to navigate through the data, we need to sign in, which is not possible to the default interface of Community Solid Server. But we can use any Solid app to access this pod even if it's on localhost. Yeah, let's see what is going on here. So now we have a pod, local pod, a profile directory with a card, a turtle file, readme. Okay, let's actually try to use a Solid app using this pod. Let's visit browser.podos.org and log in with HTTP localhost 3000. Log in, and then authorize the app. Just to make this sure, there's no server for PodOS browser or anything. This only means that the app that has been loaded on the browser will be able to access your data on localhost. So only local data access here. So we're signed in. We don't have a name because the default profile doesn't have one, but the URI is shown and we can see that we are signed in here. And we can also navigate to data in our local pod by entering the URI here. We'll show the README, but we can also navigate to the profile. Oh no, local pod. It's hosted on local-pod/profile. The card here. Yeah, here we go. We could now use PodOS, for example, to add a name, like a card FN, practical solid. Now let's take a look at what this did to our pod. Yeah, let's see how the card TTL was changed in our local file system. Data local pod profile card TTL. And now we can see here that actually a vcard fn predicate and the value practical solid has been added to our turtle file by PodOS browser. So you can see that you can use just normal solid apps to access any pod, even pods that are hosted on localhost. But of course, the idea is to get up and running a pod on your own domain, for example, hosted on a VPS or on a Raspberry Pi at home that you expose to the internet if you would like. But you can also run pods in your internal network and access them from your browser, because there are no servers in most of the Solid apps that need to access your pod. Only apps that are already running locally in your browser, and you can use them to access your data anywhere you stored it. So I hope this helped you to get started with running your own pod. There are, of course, a lot of settings you could do running CSS. They are all documented in the documentation of Community Solid Server. So if you want to know more, feel free to dive in there and look through it and yeah, have fun with it.